guys, welcome back to my channel today. In today's video, we are going to be ranking all of the palettes that I tried in 2020. There are 45 palettes to talk about today, and I'm so excited because it's kind of revisiting all of the palettes that we talked about, all the reviews I've done, the hits and misses. So thank you so much for such a great 2020, and I'm super excited to get into 2021. Now, without further ado, let's chat all about the eyeshadow palettes that I tried this year from worst to best. The first one is from Dior. Now this is one that I just recently reviewed. By far, this is the worst palette of the year. This is the 3 Couleur Tri-Oblique eyeshadow palette from Dior, and this is the shade range Pure Petals. This is, out of the two of them, this is slightly worse, but both of them are bad. This is a palette that is for spring 2021. I was able to get it from Selfridges and review it pretty early, and this is one that honestly, super dry, very stiff formulation. This is one that I would never recommend, unfortunately, and definitely has been placed last. Now, palette number 44, or second last, is its partner in this collection, and this is the Triple Bloom one. So the first one was Pure Petals. This is the second one in the spring 2021 collection that Dior has released in this Tri-Oblique eyeshadow palette kind of range. And although the color story to me speaks to me a little bit more than Pure Petals, this is the one that I actually tried in my video, and it was so hard to work with. It was very hard to blend out. I felt like building up the color was near impossible. You do have to use a foam brush or a very stiff bristled brush to get any pigment off of these, and even then, it's struggle bus city. So it's really hard to use these. This is why they're definitely in the worst of this year, and I highly recommend that you pick something else from the line. The Dior Quints are a lot better. Those are the ones with the 5 eyeshadows in them, and that is one that we're going to be talking about later on in this video. Coming in at number 43, unfortunately, is the Goss Pearl Moonstone palette. This is one I've already decluttered because I was pretty disappointed in it. I actually liked his Imperial Topaz one a little bit better. This is the one that I just really felt like some of the shadows, again, drier, a little bit sheerer. They were able to blend out, which I appreciated, but you did have to pack them on. There was one shade in that palette. It was like a peachy color that had next to no pigment translation. So this was something that just the shimmery blue shade was the only shade that I actually liked. I did think that the variability between shades was also a little bit more minimal, and I would have liked a little bit more there, but unfortunately that one also didn't work out for me this year. I do still support Goss, and I love that he's a fellow beauty creator, very talented, but I just wish that that Pearl Moonstone palette had worked out for me. Now, palette number 42 is the Natasha Denona Love palette. Very interestingly, this is placed in some creators' best of the year. Others, like myself, it was placed in the worst side of the year. The reason for myself was that I did have a really weird batch of this one, and I talked about this in a previous video also, where I found that a lot of these palettes were linked to a bad batch code, and if you were unlucky enough to get that palette, then you had dry, patchy, really hard to blend, extremely stiff formulations from her, which is so strange because that's really not like Natasha Denona. So this palette was the exact same story. It was very hard to work with. Although I really love the color story, it's very Valentine's Day and romantic looking. It was definitely one that I had a really hard time justifying that price point because of how difficult the shadows were, and I know that she can do better. All right, now palette number 41 is actually a holiday release from Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Super Nudes palette. I do also have this one decluttered as of now. This is one that had kind of like an interesting matte slash satin formula. It was really cool, but this is one though that had more of a sheer pigment translation. So if you are someone that really likes having more of a sheer look on the lid, then that palette was probably a bit more suitable for you. But I just found that once I was blending them together, I felt like they were okay, but I had to build them up, and I couldn't use certain shades with other shades because they started to look a little bit muddled together. So this was a palette that unfortunately disappointed me from her, and I'm a big fan of Charlotte Tilbury. Palette number 40 belongs to Marc Jacobs. This is also his holiday release. This is the iconic multi-finish eyeshadow palette in Cherrific. This is also one I talked about on my channel quite a bit and did a whole review on this also. This palette was fairly okay with the exception of the Lame shade, which is the second last one from the end. It was a really nice cherry color, but it was really hard to work with. This was also one that I felt like pigment wasn't translating well. I had to build it up with my finger quite a bit, and even then it just didn't seem like it had a lot of slip to it. It was just a really stiff, dry kind of consistency. So even though this palette as a whole had a decent color story, it was very similar to a lot of other palettes like the cherry themed palettes of the year, and this was one that unfortunately missed the mark. Coming in at number 39 is the Too Faced Salted Caramel palette. Now, it's very obvious that a lot of these decluttered palettes are towards the bottom. It just makes a lot of sense when you think about it, but this is the Salted Caramel palette from Too Faced. Actually, formulation-wise, not too bad. But when it comes to the rest of the palettes that I'm going to be talking about, this is one that also just seemed to be totally fine. The tin packaging in the Too Faced line is your best bet at getting their best formulation. So this is one with a tin packaging, but it was a very warm tone color story, was very heavily scented also, which is much like other Too Faced products. And this one to me, I just didn't seem to be picking up a lot, even though the formulation was totally fine. I did pick up the pumpkin spice one a lot more, and that's why that one is ranked a little bit higher in this ranking. Palette number 38 belongs to Pat McGrath Labs. This is the Rose Decadence palette. This is also an earlier release in 2020, and this one has really nice cardboard packaging. Not my favorite packaging style, but you know, not too bad. This one was less bulky than some of her other 6-pan palette packaging styles, which I did appreciate. Now, the colors in here, you can see we have a very similar color story compared to some of the other ones I've talked about with those rich pinks. This one to me was actually fairly close to some of the other formulations she's done. I do still think her 10-pan Motherships palettes are the best formulated products, but this is the one that I think is pretty dang close. The shimmers are great. I think the mattes are a teeny bit stiffer than what I'm used to. She usually offers a really creamy matte, but all in all, a really lovely palette. And when I do pick it up, I do enjoy it. This is a really nice color story and kind of going along the same rose theme that has made her super popular lately. Okay, now palette number 37. This belongs to a new brand from 2020, and this is the Makeup by Mario line. This is the Mattes palette. So as you can see here, this is a palette that I think ideally is for a makeup artist, which of course he's a makeup artist, so it makes sense why he would make something like this. What I prefer is having a palette that has a mix of mattes and different finishes, but if you want an all-over matte palette, this I think is great. And you can cater to a lot of clients if you happen to be a makeup artist with this as well. This to me is ranked a little bit lower this year because for my personal use, I'm only really using certain shades. There's certain shades that are a bit neglected, but either way, this is a fantastic matte palette if you are interested in something like this on the market. All right, guys, now palette number 36. This is actually the only Huda palette that I tried this year, and this is the Huda Beauty Gold palette. Now, this is one that I think was a bit surprising with regards to finishes in here. I actually thought that a lot of these would have a little bit more pigment behind them, but instead, a lot of these are really like the finishing shimmer shades, kind of like the palette of Pops from Charlotte Tilbury, where you have that nice shimmer top coat. It's very similar to that. A lot of these shades are really just for that sheer top coat of shimmer. So we do have 3 mattes in here, the rest are shimmer. There are varying finishes in here, which I appreciate, but all in all, I do think this is a palette that I wish had a little bit more to it. So this is a lovely palette also if you're interested in her formulation. I do think her mattes are nice and creamy, they're nice and buildable. There are only 3 in here, and these 3 shades do tend to anchor in a lot of her palettes, but these shimmers are really beautiful as well. Palette number 35 for my ranking of 2020 eyeshadow palettes belongs to Urban Decay. This is the Naked Heat palette. I did talk about this recently as well in a video where I talked about everything I purchased in 2020 at Sephora, and this is a palette that I actually forgot about quite a bit. So I purchased it out of FOMO and then I completely forgot to use it. I have been using it here and there. I've really encouraged myself to because, like I said, I've completely forgotten. But this is a really lovely formulation. I do think the reason why it's ranked where it is because my excitement, as you can tell by the fact that I nearly forgot about it, is kind of dwindling for Urban Decay and their brand. The eyeshadows were really nice for like Naked One when I was first getting into makeup. This is one that I think is very consistent with the rest of the Naked palettes. I do really like the color story of this though, so if you're one that's into classics and you want something really warm and really fiery, and they add that nice like seductiveness to the eyes, I think. I don't know, it's just weird. Like every single friend of mine that has this palette, and probably why I bought it out of FOMO, was because it was such a beautiful look they were able to create. It just looks so smoky and so sultry. So this is a really nice palette for that. Coming in at palette number 4 is actually the second Mario palette that I have in my collection. It is the Makeup by Mario Shimmers palette, and this is actually one that I use more than the mattes, just because I am such a fan of shimmer shades. This is only shimmers, so once again, if you are a makeup artist and you want your mattes and you want your shimmers, then getting both of these palettes will be really nice additions to a kit. But I do like the quality of these. I do think they're really, really nice. They're pigmented, they hold their own. They're definitely more than just top coats, which I really prefer, because the Huda one, you know, time and place for those top coat shimmers. These have much more pigment underneath, so you don't have to wear a matte underneath them. You can if you want, but they do hold their own too. So I really, really like that about this palette. I also like because this kind of reminds me of a candy store. It's just bright, vibrant, gorgeous colors. I do tend to find this is more of an accessory palette though, so I'm not actually blending a lot of these shimmers together. Usually they're like a matte and then one of these shimmers. It's kind of like a one and done or two and done kind of situation, but this is a really, really lovely one if you want these types of shimmers solely in one palette. Moving right along to palette number 33 in this countdown. This one belongs to Rare Beauty by Selena Gomez. It is the Magnetic Spirit palette. So out of the 2 releases that she's done this year, this is the one with the pinks and the purples, and this is a really lovely one too. I did declutter these because I just knew that they weren't going to be picked up as much as other palettes, so I wanted to gift them to a friend that I knew had her heart set on them. This is a really lovely, very pigmented, very easy to blend, user-friendly palette, and I do like how all of these pigments translate just how they look in pan on the eye. That's one of the most disappointing things, I think, is when you get a palette and you see something in pan and it translates lighter or darker or totally shifts a different way. So this is a really nice, like, this is what you see, this is what you get, and I really love how user-friendly these palettes are. Palette number 32 belongs to the second palette in the Rare Beauty line, and this is the Confident Energy one. This is the one that I think had that nice greens and blue color story, but the pop of pink was the one that I was like, oh really? Like that belongs in this color story? But it totally does, because you just have to be a little bit more creative with it. You can definitely pair it with some of the other shades in here. And once again, the consistency of quality between the Magnetic Spirit as well as this one is bar none the exact same. So both of these formulations are fantastic. It just depends on what kind of color story speaks to you more. But I'd recommend getting something like this if you are kind of interested in color, but you really don't want to spend something so expensive like Charlotte Tilbury or Natasha Denona, maybe Pat McGrath. If those are way out of your budget, but you want something that's really pigmented, really beautiful, these two are really great options. They're kind of like mid-range to high-end when it comes to price. And the only reason why I decluttered them was simply because I knew they weren't going to get as much love as I knew that my friend would give them. So honestly, it's a great choice if you're interested in those color stories. Palette 31 in the countdown belongs to Chanel. This is the only quad from Chanel that I own, which is crazy. This is the Candor and Provocation one, and this is the Les Four Ombre Multi-Effect Quadra Eyeshadow Palette. You can see we have more berries and pinks in this one. So this is just following a very common trend in 2020 when there were a lot of palettes that had this really nice pink color story. These pigments have such a nice sheeniness to them. They're so smooth, and I do feel like they glide over the lid beautifully. You can blend them really nicely. You can use them really well together. So this is a really lovely one. I feel like the formulation is really unique. It's kind of like sheeny and just so stunning. This is the formulation that I think the Dior Trio Blique ones were trying to get to, because those shades were very stiff and dry, but they had that sheeniness. This has the sheeniness, but is nowhere near dry or stiff. So that's what I appreciate. I wonder if Dior was trying to mimic this one. I have no idea. Palette number 30 belongs to Tom Ford. This is the holiday collection palette. This is the Soleil Neige palette in 04 First Frost. This is a gorgeous white compact. You can see it has that really nice gold bar detailing at the bottom. And this is the exact same quad style as the other Tom Ford quads that I have owned in the past. This is a much cooler toned color story and still has that really nice sheeniness, glowiness, shimmer quality to all of these. The reason why it's ranked where it is because I do wish there was slight more versatility with that bottom row. The bottom row does translate very similar on the lid, so for that, I wish there was a little bit more. Fantastic formulation. If you love Tom Ford quads, I'm sure that you're a fan of this holiday one because I don't see any quality differences between the permanent line and this one. These are just nice like icy pinks, icy white with those really nice browns to just add some dimension and smokiness to the lid. This is a lovely one and you guys swore by it so much. I almost didn't get it, but I'm glad that I did. Now we are on to palette number 29. This actually comes from Charlotte Tilbury and this is her palette of pops this year. This is the Dazzling Diamonds palette. You can see here that this palette has a gorgeous, gorgeous color story. I'm obsessed with it. I really, really love how that blue looks against my brown eyes. When I wore this palette, I was just so excited at how gorgeous it looked. And it really, really did not disappoint. The right side of this quad is a very similar point from the Tom Ford one that I just talked about, where I do wish that there was slight more diversity there. So that's why I also ranked this one where it was, because again, a little bit of a missed opportunity there. I do wish she added another color instead of having two very similar bronzy golds. Palette number 28 belongs to Too Faced. This is the Pumpkin Spice palette. This is actually currently the only Too Faced palette in my collection. I have since decluttered quite a few of them, and the reason is just because I feel like Too Faced, just like Urban Decay, is kind of losing some steam with regards to my interest in pulling them out of my collection. I feel like the creativity within the brand has shifted a little bit, and it's not quite appealing to me as how it used to be. But this palette is ranked where it is because it actually has a lot of versatility to it. You can see, you guys, that it has a gorgeous color story. I love how there's mattes and shimmers in here, and you can do a whole bunch of different looks with this. This is by far the palette that I use the most from the brand, and it does have a really nice creamy matte formula as well as a creamy shimmer formula. So this is a lovely one, you guys. I do recommend it if you're able to get it at a markdown sale at this point. This is a fantastic palette. Moving right along to palette number 27. This is the Trio Chrome eyeshadow palette. I do want to say a special thanks to my friend PANNA who helped me get this palette. She actually ordered it for me from Selfridges in the UK and shipped it to me because she is such a good friend, honestly. So go follow her Instagram. I will link her Instagram in my description box. It is The Glam Guide. This is the Trio Chrome palette. Now, what I will say about this is that this is a full-size Natasha Denona palette. So if you are into her formulations and you're willing to spend like top dollar for them, this is the large size. Not her largest, but definitely larger. I love the mattes in here. I do think that there is slight dryness with a couple at the bottom row, but other than that, it's really, really great. The only thing that I think that people should know about this palette are the three Trio Chromes in the middle column there. I do think they do have some shifting, but I do think that they're not as multi-shift as what she kind of claims that they're supposed to be. If you want more of that multi-shift, you're probably going to have to go for her liquid chromium eyeshadows. Those unfortunately kept creasing on me in the middle of my eyes. I'm not sure why. A lot of people really love them though. So if you want something like crazy multi-effect, those are probably where you want to go. But this is the palette here, you guys, and I think it's really nice and bright. I actually think I'm going to use this much more in the spring. It was released in the winter, and I think it's just much more of a spring vibes kind of palette. So I'm definitely going to be using it more in the springtime. Really, really like this one though, so I'm glad I have it in my collection. Thank you once again to PANNA. Palette number 26 belongs to Charlotte Tilbury, and this is from her most recent Hollywood Flawless Eye Filter collection. She did release 3 palettes from this line, and the first one is number 26 in my countdown. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Eyes of a Star. Now, I did do a review video on these, and I did wear all of them on my eyes. These Hollywood Eye Filter palettes are really meant for, I would say, more of a subtle kind of glam. They're not really meant to be bold and bright. They're really just enhancing your eyes from more of a subtle, soft glam kind of way. I think that's how Charlotte meant these palettes to be, but the reason why this one is ranked where it is just simply because of the collection of shades for my eyes. I just liked the other ones better. This one is still a lovely formulation of shades. You can see that. The Hollywood embossment does end up wearing away as you wear them, so that is something that if you don't like that kind of thing, they will fade away. But I do really like this one, I will say, but I think out of the three, this is the one that is my least favorite. Now, palette number 25 is Diva Lights. This is the same collection as the Eyes of a Star one, except this one to me, I think I like a little bit better simply color story wise. I do think shades are consistent when it comes to performing between palettes. I don't think you can see like this palette being so much better than the other two, for instance. But I do like how this one offered me a subtle smokiness that I never expected. So here is Diva Lights. I really, really love that nice matte in the bottom left corner there. It actually is a really soft kind of black matte. This one is kind of like going out on the town, but not having something super loud, just a little bit understated with that little hint of smokiness. This one too is one that has soft metallics, very easy to work with, very pigmented, and I do like this one from Charlotte. Palette number 24 is us backtracking a little bit and talking about Dior once again. Now this is the quint that I was talking about that has the formulation that is really nice and soft and smooth to work with, very buildable. This is the 5 Couleur Couture eyeshadow palette. This is the one in Nude Dress. Love this one for an everyday subtle glam. This is so, so good, especially if you're not one that's really wanting a ton of color. There's taupes in here, there's pinks in here, there's nice browns in here. This is such a nice everyday friendly color story. I'm obsessed with this one, and I just love how these shades look. Honestly, if you're not one that wants bright color but you still want a little bit of color, I just think this will be so good for you. They do have a purple quint from their spring 2021 collection that I was not able to get because it sold out so fast. I'm really hoping that one is just as good as this one, but this is palette number 24. Let's talk about palette number 23. It does belong to Pat McGrath Labs. This is the Blitz Astral Quad from last year, and this is the Nocturnal Nirvana Quad. Now, I did include it in this year's countdown of the palettes that I used because this countdown is not just catered to 2020 only releases. This is just for any palette that I happen to test this year. But this is a lovely one for when I want a bold pop of color. I am not one that goes for the blues and the greens that often, and I'm really trying to break that habit of staying close in my safe zone where I'm just doing pinks and golds and that kind of thing. This is the palette that when I feel brave to wear color, this is what I grab because it has the shimmer that I absolutely love. They're so forgiving because they have shimmer to them. I just think like you don't have to have that perfect blend. They're just so, so great. So this is a lovely one. And if you want just the Pat McGrath special shades that are included in her 10 pan mothership palettes, these quads here, they are still available. These are just the special shades, the ones that she's known for, that truly uniqueness, that gel smooth slip, gorgeous shimmer quality. You do have a bit of fallout with these because it's so lightweight, but it's so worth it. All right, guys, palette number 22 is actually from this year's Pat McGrath holiday collection. This is the Celestial Divinity Luxe Quad in Fleur Fantasia. This out of the 3 of her palettes that she released this year in the black lacquer quad packaging is my least favorite, and only because I think I'm not wearing it as much because it's not springtime yet. For some reason, I do think this is also much more of a spring palette, just like Trio Chrome. I think this is one that has a really nice, beautiful shimmer quality to them, beautiful creamy mattes in this one. I love, love this one up here, that really gorgeous pale purple. I think it stands out in this palette, but I just think I'm not grabbing it as much because of how bright and vibrant and spring-like this palette is. These aren't the special shades from Pat McGrath, but they are still really rich and beautiful, creamy, easy to blend, easy to layer, gorgeous shadows. This one you can't go wrong. If you love this color story, this will be a fave for sure. Palette number 21 belongs to Pat McGrath as well, and this is an interesting story. I did declutter this one last year, and then this one came back into my life as a packing mistake from Sephora. I talked about this on my channel where all of a sudden I got an extra item in a Sephora haul, and this is the Pat McGrath Iconic Illumination Palette. This is the only reason why I put it in this year, because I tried it again this year. I didn't really grab it the first time, and I think it's just because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to use this a ton. And one of my friends really, really loved it. So I'm like, yeah, go for it. You can have it. And I didn't miss it. I'm going to be honest. But then it came back and I'm like, that is kind of nice, isn't it? But this is a lovely quad as well. This is also a Blitz Astral quad. So it has those specialty shades as well. And this I think is a really easy palette to work with. I think you could even use this palette as its own look. You wouldn't need anything else. Whereas the Nocturnal one, I do find I'm pulling other palettes with it. So this is still a really, really lovely one. I will say also that top, white shimmer there, I do also find some fallout with, but once again, so worth it because it stays on the lids all day. The pigment is there, the shine is there. It's so worth it, you guys. All right, guys, now palette number 20 is actually from a Black Friday release from Natasha Denona. This is something that she's had in her collection for quite some time. This is her 28 pan palette. This is the blue purple one, I believe. The OG Natasha, when she first released like quite a few palettes before she got really, really big. I think this was in amongst some of the originals. And this is one that I think by itself must be 310 Canadian or something like that. It is wild how expensive it is. It is also catered to a makeup artist with a kit, obviously, if you want like certain shades and colors and that kind of thing. But if you're just a makeup lover, I still think you can use this one by itself because there is that mix of finishes. There's the mattes, the shimmers. I got this palette as part of a BOGO event. It was this one plus the other one for the price of one. But you can see that you can do so many looks with this. Like you can easily see so many. And that's what I really like. She makes such user-friendly palettes. The Natasha fan in me is really happy that I finally got these and I scored them at such a good deal. So these have been fantastic. Palette number 19 is the other 28 pan from Natasha Denona, and this is the greeny brown one. So the reason why I ranked this one a little bit higher is simply because I find that I like the greens and the browns a little bit more, and I do think that they really work nice with my brown eyes. Not to say the other one doesn't either, but for some reason this one is a little bit more comfortable for me, so I've been using this one slightly more. Now this is one that is also full of shimmer, full of mattes, very cohesive color story. You can easily see looks with this. Definitely also appealing to a makeup artist who also does work on the go because you have all sorts of shades in here, not just like your classic green and brown, but multiple different variants of it. I just think these pigments are so rich. Most of these are shimmer, you can tell, and like I'm totally fine with that, I'm gonna be honest. I just love some of these colors. There's some Tiffany blues in there, there's some really nice silvers, some browns. So this is also one that I'm obsessed with, and I'm so happy I got as part of the BOGO event. Next, we have palette number 18 in this countdown of ranking all of the 2020 eyeshadow palettes I tried this year. Now, this is actually one from Charlotte Tilbury as well, and this one is so impossible to open without feeling like I'm breaking my nails. It's so weird, so I always like to take a pen or something to prop it open. But this is the Easy Eye palette for the Charlotte Darling look. Here is the color story. Now, this is lovely. I think this is definitely Charlotte in a palette because she's so used to having those peachy pinks, those pinks, and those purples. And this, I think, is catered to a ton of girls that just want a one and done, very easy to put a look together palette. There's shimmers, there's mattes, they work together beautifully. The cohesiveness is there. This was in the same style as the Super Nudes palette, but for some reason, this one is way, way better. I was using this one a lot more, and when I was testing Super Nudes, I found I was still pulling shades from this one. I always hurt myself and or break my nails when I try to get this one open, so I'm trying to just leave it ajar, but this is a lovely one. You guys can see that. Consistency of formulation of this one is so good, so this one I highly recommend, and I do think if you want to try the brand out, but you don't want like a 12 shade one, but you want something a little bit more than a quad, this would be a great one to try her brand out with. Palette number 17 is actually the limited edition Marc Jacobs iconic multi-finish eyeshadow palette in Extravagance. This one just barely didn't make the cut for my best of 2020 because I had such good ones for that countdown, but this one, you guys, it's in number 17 because it is so, so good. This is one that I think is better than the Cherrific one. The formulations for these are so consistent. Every shade is a winner. I think when you just have like 7 shades, because there's 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. Double checking that. There's only 7 in here. So you have to make every single one work, but this is one that's so user-friendly, and these shades are like great Gatsby vibes. I've said this so many times this year. It's that nice like vintage classic glam. So cool. Like, I just love this one. I do know this one is limited edition, so if you are able to grab this before it goes away, please do, because I know that Marc Jacobs doesn't really bring limited edition back. I've seen some come and go, but I've never seen them again. So definitely take advantage if you want to try a different formulation that's really stunning. This is a great palette. I'm super happy I have it. Palette number 16 is also one from Pat McGrath, and this is from the Celestial Divinity collection as well. This is one of the Luxe Quads, and this is in Risque Rose. I've talked about this to death, so I'm just going to do a couple quick highlights for this one, but the right side of this quad is my favorite. These shades are made in Italy, whereas the other quads from this year are made in the US. There's definitely a distinction between this one over the other two. It just seems like they're a little bit creamier and they're closer to the special shades than the other ones, but that doesn't mean the other ones are bad. It just means that the formulation of these is so reminiscent of her other made in Italy palettes, which are the 10 pan motherships. This has definitely been an accessory palette. I've used this with other palettes. I've absolutely loved it for that. So if you want a quad from this year's collection and you want it as close to the formulation as the Mothership 10 pan palettes made in Italy, this one is made in Italy and I think won't disappoint. Now let's talk about palette number 15, which also comes from Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Instant Eye palette in Pillow Talk, and this is the 12 pan extension of her Pillow Talk collection. She has done such a good job with creating so many Pillow Talk products. I think some of us are like, wow, I'm so over it. Other of us are like, bring it on, we don't care. So this is one that I really love. I love that they're grouped into threes, so you can put looks together very easily because she's already broken it down for you guys. I would say this palette has more mattes than shimmers. It's more of a matte heavy palette versus the alternative. So this is one that I use, and then I use like some Pat McGrath shimmers on top or things like that. So I've used this palette alongside others, but then I've also used this palette by itself because it's so easy to do. But you can see there's like one trio on the far left that has a shimmer, one trio on the far right that has shimmers, but the other two are matte. So it's really nice that you have that diversity. This is something that is also not common with Charlotte. She usually has a lot more shimmers in her palettes compared to mattes. This is a very easy palette to wear for every single day to work, transitioning to night. So great. And I've recommended this one a lot this year too. It's a great one. Palette number 14 is the last Charlotte Tilbury Holiday Flawless Eye Filter Quad. This is the Star Aura one. This is the one that I wear by far the most. And I think it's just because it's so subtle and so easy to work with the shades. You really can't even mess it up. So the Define and the Smoke shades in here, they add some subtle depth, but nothing too crazy. The difference between the all over shades and then the Smoke and Define shades is not as dark as some of the other ones. So this is much more for an everyday friendly, just light wash, but it's not sheer though. That's the difference. It still has enough pigment to it that it looks like your eyelid is covered, but it's much more light. It's certainly not lacking in pigment, which I think is the biggest thing. So this one is really lovely. You can see it's very well loved, but I just love this one for everyday friendly looks. I just think it's gorgeous for that very subtle glam, and it just glides over the lids so well. Like, these just blend well, layer well, and I would say out of the 3 Hollywood Flawless Eye Filter palettes, this is the one that I've recommended the most, then Diva Lights, then Eyes of a Star, which is why they're ranked where they are. Palette number 13 in my 2020 every single palette I've tried countdown belongs to Natasha Denona. This is the Bronze palette. This is one that I could not put down during the summer. It was so bronzy, so beautiful, but I also love how gorgeous these shades go together. A lot of people, I think, noticed that the versatility of this palette was not as much as some of her others, but I didn't mind because these are all shades I always use. So this was great. I don't know, a lot more shimmers than mattes, which spoke to my heart. It even has a really nice smoky matte purple as well as a shimmer purple, and that just adds such depth. Those are 2 pans I dipped in quite a bit, but you can definitely see that there's very subtle differences in some of the shimmers, so that could be a deal breaker for some of you. So just make sure that you're really paying attention to this one. Is this really one that you would use a lot of the shimmers with, or is this one that you just think is too similar? For myself personally, I've been so happy that I've gotten this one, and the quality is consistent, which I also really appreciate. We are down to the last 12. I'm so excited. These are some fantastic products from this year that I was able to test and try out. Palette number 12 belongs to Natasha as well. It is the Mini Zendo palette. Now, this is one that I have characteristically called the Mini Retro Grown Up Sultry Mature version, because I just love how this palette has the same building blocks as Mini Retro. So this one has a gorgeous purple, we have a nice silver blue, we have those pinks and those peachy pinks. This is a great one. I am just so happy to have this one. I think I gave this away in a giveaway as well because I loved it so much and wanted to gift it to one of you. And I just think this is great. Like for her minis, she has absolutely nailed her minis this year. Some of them used to be so bad. The quality was horrific. But this year's one is so great, and I'm going to be talking about the other one as well that I love. All of the colors work together, and this is definitely like a palette that if you want to grab something that's smaller, easy to travel with, and you just have like gorgeous looks, and they're very cohesive and easy to build, this is the one. Like, especially if you love that warm, sultry kind of effect to the eye. Palette 11 also belongs to Natasha Denona, and this is the second mini that I tried out this year. This was earlier on, I believe, in the spring, which I think was a perfect launch for this one. This is the Mini Retro palette. This is a lovely one for much more daytime looks. It's great for those nice, bright spring vibes that still has nice spring color, but nothing too crazy vibrant. I think many of you enjoy this palette as well because this is also one that she has nailed this year when it comes to quality. Some of them, oh my, she has put out some that have been truly disastrous, but this is one that I absolutely love as well. And I do think I'm going to be using much more in the spring because when I did use this one a ton, it was usually during the spring months. But I love this one. I also love how cohesive this color story is. It's just beautiful. Palette number 10 is one from Sydney Grace. This is my very first Sydney Grace experience. I really hope to be able to try out more from the line because I keep hearing amazing things. And this is the Mel Thompson collaboration as well. This is Tiny Marvels. I feel like Mel has done an amazing job with this. I am slightly biased, I'm going to be totally honest, because I love Mel, but at the same time, the quality of these shadows is fantastic. So when it works out that one of your really great friends that you love and respect has put out a palette with another brand and it actually is bomb, that's perfect, right? So I love that. It's a fantastic palette, and this one really, really nice for challenging me with regards to pastel color, but also anchored nicely with the shades that I always use. So the browns, the pinks, the golds. We have some shimmer pinks, some shimmer golds. We have a really beautiful duochrome at the top here. I really can't wait to try more from this line because I'm very, very impressed. But this is a great one. Like you can see that pastel green, the two pastel purples, those were a little bit like, I don't know if I can make that look pretty, but I really did. They made such an easy to use palette, one that is so beautiful. So this one I love. This is palette number 10. Palette number 9 is actually a luxury quad from Charlotte Tilbury. And this is one that was released a little bit beforehand, but I didn't get it. For some reason, it just skipped by me. So this is actually Queen of Glow from Charlotte Tilbury. And this is one that a lot of you guys told me has a very similar formulation to Fire Rose. It has that very same smoothness, pigmentation, slight metallicness, things like that, and it absolutely does. This is very beautiful on the eyes. This is definitely one I'm really excited to keep using. I've only used a couple of times now, but this is great. Like right away, those first couple of times have already blown me away. I love the formulation of these. I do think Fire Rose is still a little bit different because Fire Rose truly has that different shimmer that I haven't seen in anything else, but this one is lovely. I got this actually at a Black Friday event through Beautylish as well, and I love the color story of this. I mean, this is right up my alley. These colors I'm very comfortable with using. I have mentioned already that I gravitate towards like the pinks and the golds and the browns. So this one I was like, well, yeah, I'm totally gonna use, like no problem. Palette number 8 is the last Celestial Divinity Luxe Quad from Pat McGrath this year, and this is the Interstellar Icon Quad. I've talked about this so much, so I'm going to make it also very brief because I know you guys know how much I love this one. This one is such winter glam to me, especially that gorgeous blue. This palette works so beautifully together. You don't even need to have any other quads with it or any other shades because they just work so well. They're so compatible. All of these look fantastic. It really surprised me too because at first I was like, is this actually gonna work? But yeah, no, totally it would. It's lovely. I don't know what I was thinking because of course it's a very cohesive palette. She knew exactly what she was doing with this one and it's stunning. All right, guys, palette number 7 is also a Pat McGrath palette, and this is the Mothership Bronze Seduction. Now, this is also one that has creeped back into my life. Another mistake, which is insane. I can't believe they made a mistake and packed this one in with my other order. I feel like this palette is a really nice palette to get if you don't have a ton of other browns in your collection or berries or things like that, and you want to try a Pat McGrath palette. I do think that this one, as well as Divine Rose 1, would be, well, there's one more yet that we'll talk about, but there's 3 of them that I'd recommend as like the first Pat McGrath palette, and this is definitely one of them. I have been really hesitant in the past about this one because I did think that there were quite a few shades that we've all had. The shimmer gold, those browns, you know, that purple and stuff. Like, I've seen a lot of that in other palettes, and this palette is over $200 in Canadian dollars. But there's no doubting the quality of this one. If you're a Pat McGrath lover, I know you'll love it. But if this is like your very first Pat product and you don't mind having additional browns, additional shades that you probably have in your collection already, then this is a great one. I do think the quality is there. That is definitely something I've never contested. So this is a fantastic one. I do think the shades that shine in here are the special shades. Really, really nice for someone that struggles with putting looks together because it is so simple to see them. So this is palette number 7. All right, guys, palette number 6 is actually another Pat McGrath palette, so we're kind of on a Pat McGrath roll here. This is the Divine Rose 2 palette in her special limited edition pink packaging. It was a special package style for the release of this one, but this is essentially the continuation of Divine Rose in that collection. Divine Rose 1 was an amazing palette. It still is one of my favorites, and she decided to do an extension of that and add a second. And this is one that I think is much more bold. You can see we have another one of those really bright pinks, kind of similar to Risque Rose with regards to how they look. This is one that I think makes adding color really easy to do. I also love the specialty shades here. There's a beautiful duochrome right here. This is definitely consistent quality when it comes to the rest of her motherships. As long as she keeps doing some amazing sales, which she has been on these palettes, I feel like I will eventually own all of them. It's kind of nice to have that incentive if you're patient. You can definitely get quite a bit of savings off of these, and these are amazing, amazing shadows. Palette number 5 is the Charlotte Tilbury Holiday Palette. This is the Bejeweled Eyes to Hypnotize palette, and this, you guys, is so stunning. So this is similar with regards to how it's set up, just like the Instant Eye palette in Pillow Talk that we talked about before. So you can make looks really, really easily because it's essentially a guide for you as to which colors work well with others. So I love this one, and I also love how this one has a bit more of a shimmer presence compared to Instant Eye Pillow Talk. Prepare yourself because they just look so beautiful, especially those shimmers. They're so, so nice. So I really, really love the purple trio. I love the gold trio. I love the brown trio. I think the berry trio is the one that I use the least. I'm not sure why. I think it's just because I have other berries like that in my collection, but either way, these are lovely, lovely. The quality is there. It's a fantastic 12 pan, and I do think she did a great job with the holiday release. Coming in at palette number 4 is actually the last Pat McGrath palette we're going to be talking about in the countdown of 2020 palettes. This is the Pat McGrath Celestial Divinity palette. I think she did a fantastic job for this holiday's release. It is different for her because it wasn't a Mothership 12 pan palette, which she has normally released around this time of year. Instead, she's done a bigger variety of shades, which you can see here, but it's at a reduced price so that you don't have to pay an arm and a leg, but they are also smaller in size. So it's nice that you're able to play with a ton of color in this one without having to pay the price point. As soon as I heard that she was releasing this many shades in one palette, I was like, I'm about to go broke, I think, because this is going to be expensive. But she cut with regards to packaging because this is just a cardboard packaging style. Nothing wrong with it, but it's just not as heavy and luxe as the 10 pan palettes, so she saved a lot of money, I think, with producing this. But this is one especially. If you missed out on the Star Wars collection, there are 2 6 pan collections from Star Wars in here. The only new shades are the middle 2 columns, but either way, love, love this palette, you guys. This is one where I want that purple, that metallic. I use this a ton during the holiday. Definitely one of the best from this year for sure. This is palette number 4. Okay guys, we are down to my top 3 of all of the palettes I've tried this year. So palette number 3 belongs to Natasha Denona. This is the Glam palette. This is also a midi size, just like the bronze. Now I think you can do this easily for like a wedding or a night out. I mean, if we can get night outs in this year, hopefully, fingers crossed. But this is a fantastic palette, has absolutely surprised me because when they released this one, I was like, I'm really into warm tones. It's all right. Not sure if I like it, but I love this one. You can see here this one also has quite a few shimmers, which I am not mad at. But this one I would argue has a little bit more versatility among shades compared to bronze. So if you're interested in a cool tone palette with shimmer and with mattes, this is a great one, especially if you want to get some Natasha Denona in your life, but you don't want to necessarily spend for a big 28 pan, let's say, or even like a larger palette. It's definitely of the top 3 that I've picked over and over and over again to use this year. I'm obsessed with this one. Palette number 2, you guys will be pretty surprised by. It only made an appearance kind of sorta towards the end or the last quarter of the year. This is the Pat McGrath Labs Sublime Mothership palette. So this is a 10 pan palette that I got from the Black Friday sale. I got this 50% off. So the green makes this to me. I also love the color story here. So this one or Bronze Seduction or Divine Rose are the top 3 that if you are wanting just one and you want to invest your money, those would be the ones I would go for, like one of those to start, because they are truly beautiful. We have those gorgeous Blitz Astrals, we have the gorgeous creamy mattes. These are the best mattes that she makes, the best shimmers that she makes. This is a stunning palette, you guys. I'm in love with it, especially that green. It was really, really nice to use this holiday. We are on to the last palette, and this is the palette that absolutely blew me away this year. Apparently, it is not coming back, which is so sad. I can't even believe it. I am surprised she's not bringing it back because it was such a bestseller. This is number 1 because of the textures, because of the creaminess, because of the pigmentation. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Fire Rose Quad. Now this is the perfect holiday smoky palette to me because it has that gorgeous sultriness, just like I've mentioned in other palettes, but it has this truly unique shimmer right here, which has much more of a flakiness to it, in a good way, like gold flakes. It's a little bit heavier than her other pop shades that she's done. This is a fantastic one, you guys, and the fact that a lot of you have said that she has stated it's not coming back doesn't make sense because she loves to sell her bestsellers. So I don't understand that. Perhaps if a lot of us complain, we'll be able to bring it back because it truly is special. And I would say that it has a really nice metallicness to it, but nothing too crazy loud. That matte is also a gorgeous matte to anchor this palette. This by far is the most used palette this year, I think, and it's just so beautiful. So I'm hesitant to give it number 1 place when I know it's no longer available, but I really hope she brings it back for us because it's truly special. What was your favorite palette from 2020? Do let me know all of your thoughts. I do have other ranking videos if you're interested. I've ranked all my Natasha Denonas, all my Pat McGraths, all my holiday palettes from this year. So if you're interested in more ranking videos, don't forget to subscribe because I love doing those and helping you guys out, making the best purchases in the high-end makeup category. Until my next one, guys, take care and stay safe. Bye, guys.
But somewhere there's a light inside